Good evening and welcome to Poland Daily. I'm Natalia Moczulska and this is the news. Increasing criticism is falling on Germany for its resistance to the transfer of Leopard 2 tanks to Ukraine. The government in Berlin is hiding behind the United States, conditioning its decision on Washington's transfer of Abrams tanks. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is calling for increased arms deliveries amid fears of a Russian offensive on the front. A decision on this issue could come as early as tomorrow in Ramstein. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky began his speech at the World Economic Forum in Davos with a minute of silence to honor the victims of the helicopter crash in Brovary. The top leadership of the Ukrainian Interior Ministry, including the head of the ministry, Denis Monastyrsky, died in the crash. Meanwhile, European Council President Charles Michel arrived in Kiev and met with President Volodymyr Zelensky. He appealed to the West for arms supplies. Yesterday, in front of the European Parliament, I stated that tanks must be delivered. I repeat this appeal. We want to support you because we are aware that the coming weeks may decide what happens. Therefore, decisions are necessary now. To oppose thousands of tanks of the Russian Federation, bravery of our servicemen and motivation of Ukrainian people is not enough. We need weapons. According to Ukrainian intelligence, the Russian Federation wants to create an armed force of 2 million soldiers. Within days, Vladimir Putin may announce another mobilization, this time involving 500,000 people. Today, Ukraine needs support to be able to defend itself. It does not mean that Ukraine is winning today. Ukraine is resisting Russian aggression. NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg stressed that Poland has been actively supporting Ukraine from the beginning with military, economic, and humanitarian aid. So it is an inspiration to other countries.
Turkey has some legitimate security concerns. No alternate ally has suffered more terrorist attacks than Turkey. PKK is regarded as a terrorist organization by NATO allies.
German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, speaking in Davos, Switzerland, avoided answering journalists' questions on the issue of the transfer of Leopard 2 tanks to Ukraine. Disappointing, that's what journalists say about Scholz's speech. In Berlin, on the other hand, Defense Minister Boris Pistorius was sworn in, meeting with his U.S. counterpart, Lloyd Austin, a few hours later.
I very much look forward to working together with you. And it's great to be back in Germany. You know, I've got a lot of fond memories of your country from my first assignment here as a young officer. And Germany remains one of our most important allies.
The media is reporting that Germany's decision to donate its own tanks is subject to one condition. The U.S. must send Abrams to Ukraine. Washington rejects such a scenario for the time being. The coming hours will be crucial, and we will know the result of the negotiations tomorrow after the contact group on military aid to Ukraine meets in Ramstein. Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki addressed Germany's policy toward the war in Ukraine in an interview with CNN television. He stated that politicians there are still embedded in the previous era and have put everything on one card, on Russia. It's not just a question of allowing or not allowing. The critically important question is whether Germany will finally give its share of heavy and modern tanks. And this is the main question. Those 14 Polish additional tanks to 250 already handed over are not a game changer. But if France, and especially Germany and some other countries, gave 20 to 30 tanks each, it could make a difference. Former NATO chief and Danish Prime Minister Anders Fogh Rasmussen said Berlin's hesitation to send tanks has led to an escalation of the war. We cannot give Putin more time to devise cruel strategies to kill Ukrainians. Germany must unleash the Leopards now, so Ukraine can take back its territory. Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of National Defense Mariusz Błaszczak held a video conversation with the heads of defense ministries of countries that support Ukraine with arms supplies. Our job is to show that only real actual help matters. Swedish Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson has announced that his country will supply Ukraine with Archer cannon howitzers. Sweden will also send 50 CV-90 infantry fighting vehicles. When will we receive the first funds from the National Reconstruction Plan? The answer is, it depends. Currently, it depends mostly on the Senate. The upper house is scheduled to proceed with an amendment to the Supreme Court law on January 31st. It was originally scheduled to take place in February, but in response to widespread criticism, Speaker Tomasz Grodzki decided to speed up the work. According to Law and Justice, this is still too late, and yet time is money. According to Deputy Senate Speaker Marek Pęk, the Senate is playing for time. Tomasz Grodzki announces that the Senate will take up the amendment to the Supreme Court Act, probably on January 31st. This is obviously way too late. Next week would be best because the Sejm is in session, which could address the amendments and complete the legislative process. The amendment to the Supreme Court law is currently being handled by lawyers from the Senate Legislative Office. Before the upper house, the bill is also to be looked at by Legislative Committee. Senators have also sent the same draft to the Venice Commission. I know that Senator Kwiatkowski has sent a letter to the Venice Commission asking it to quickly take a position on whether the bill in its current form is lawful, complies with the Polish constitution, etc. The opposition is again drawing attention to the provision under which immunity and disciplinary cases of judges are to be decided by the Supreme Administrative Court. Opposition deputies will again file amendments to have such proceedings handled by the criminal chamber of the Supreme Court. According to the original plan, the Senate session was not scheduled to begin until February 8th, but due to the importance of the issue, the decision was made to speed up the session, although according to some senators, the last day of January is still too late. Since such a decision has been made, well, it has to be accepted. I don't think the Speaker, Mr. Grodzki, will change it. The Senate meeting will be held on January 31st, and it will be necessary to convene the Sejm again for some additional meeting, but let it be done already, so that the bill will be processed. The amendment to the Supreme Court legislation is one of the milestones that will unlock funds from the National Reconstruction Plan. However, the bill has been opposed from the beginning by Solidarna Polska. Today, Poles are told only about the EU billions that are supposed to come to Poland and heal our country. Well, there is no miracle, and there will be no miracle.
Absolutnie się nie zgadzam z tymi stwierdzeniami, które...
I absolutely disagree with the statements that are made in this video. They simplify reality and actually manipulate it. Minister Ziobro and Solidarna Polska have the right to have a different opinion.
Nie zgadzam się z tym, ale pan minister Ziobro, Solidarna Polska mają prawo mieć w tej sprawie inne zdanie.
The next session of the Sejm is scheduled for January 25th. According to the ruling camp, an expedited session of the Senate should be held on those very days. These funds could indeed support us. I'm talking about the system of the Polish economy, because this is money that is dedicated to the economic system, and therefore to support certain initiatives that are important for recovering from this crisis caused by COVID. After reconsideration by the Sejm, the bill will go to the President, who has made comments on some of the provisions. The Sejm will take up the windmill law at its upcoming session. Adoption of this legislation is one of the prerequisites for receiving funds from the National Reconstruction Plan. And now, some good news for parents. Another edition of the Toddler Plus program is being launched in Poland. As part of the government support, a benefit of 837 zł will be provided for each child under the age of 3. It is intended to help parents provide care for their children. The program provides more than 102,000 places in nurseries. Since 2016, family-friendly policies have actually been at the heart of the Law and Justice government's social policy. We have launched numerous programs. These programs are the 500-plus family benefit, the Toddler Plus program, which has been growing, and the program Good Start that provides funds for back-to-school supplies for the start of the year, but also the maternity benefit. And most importantly, last year, in this difficult year, where the war in Ukraine had already started, and after the coronavirus pandemic, we launched a program to support families, Family Care Capital, subsidized nursery care. These programs since 2016 amount to more than 227 billion zloty. This is first and foremost an investment in the family. Earlier today, mass protests were held in France by opponents of a pension reform, raising the retirement age from 62 to 64. French workers affiliated with 8 major labor unions went on strike and joined marches across the country, halting trains and cutting electricity production in protest against the government plans. French President Emmanuel Macron faces a tough nut to crack. No one in France has yet succeeded in pension reform since 1995. The protests are a major test for President Emmanuel Macron, who says his pension reform plan, which opinion polls show is hugely unpopular, is vital to ensure the system does not go bust. Pushing back the retirement age by 2 years and extending the pay-in period would bring an additional 17.7 billion euros or $19.1 billion in annual pension contributions, allowing the system to break even by 2027, according to Labor Ministry estimate. We're here quite simply because when we know that a quarter of the poorest die at 62 and that today we want to put the retirement age at 65, that makes no sense. We young people will be the first to feel the impact too. To find work, more and more jobs are retained. Well, that means more unemployment for us. So I think everyone should feel concerned. I think when people say there's no point in taking to the streets, I don't agree. I think we can also show that we are absolutely not for it, and then maybe we will be heard. So it's important. I'm here because my children are in social work. There are not only physical jobs, there is intellectual work. They work with handicapped children. It takes a toll on your nerves and your mental state, and it's really hard. And at 64, I don't see them working in those conditions. I am very moved because I was lucky to retire. In fact, that's why I'm here, and I've had the chance to enjoy 2 years with my grandchildren. The challenge for the unions is to transform opposition to the reform and anger over a cost of living crisis into a mass social protest which could eventually force the government to change tack. Union leaders are expecting to announce more strikes and protests, saying that Thursday was just the beginning. The objective for us is for this bill to be withdrawn. This is a first step. We will see how the government reacts. If the government does not listen to the striking workers, the French people, the citizens, well then there will be a next step. Seeing the level of discontent, I think this movement can only intensify. But then I repeat, the problem is in the hands of the government. It's their bill, and if they withdraw it, there will be no mobilization. And as we've said, we are ready, and we have solutions on how to improve the current system and not to shake it up or make us work longer. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Please stay tuned for Poland Daily Weather, Poland Daily Business, and some of our other programs. But for me, it's have a wonderful evening.